where everyday moments turn into unforgettable stories. Buckle up, because today's tale is not just about injustice, it's about strength, survival, and a twist that no one saw coming. When power is abused and assumptions are made, the truth can change everything. Now, let's dive in. Title: Cops throw pregnant black woman to the ground, unaware her husband is a Delta Force commander. The sun was shining over the quiet suburban streets of Brooksville, Virginia. It was the kind of neighborhood where lawn sprinklers hissed in the morning, dogs barked in the distance, and the sound of children playing filled the air. For 32-year-old Cassandra Hayes, it was just another ordinary Saturday. She was 8 months pregnant, glowing despite the fatigue in her bones. Her caramel skin shimmered under the morning light as she waddled gently to her SUV, preparing to pick up groceries and stop by the pharmacy. Her doctor had recently cautioned her about stress, but Cassandra was determined to keep life moving, even while carrying her and her husband's first child. Her husband, Captain Darius Hayes, had just returned from a mission overseas, a decorated Delta Force commander with classified achievements and top-level clearance. Darius lived 2 lives, one as a loving husband, the other as an elite warrior in America's most secretive military unit. On that Saturday, he was finally home. He was upstairs, sleeping off the jet lag after a 19-hour flight. Cassandra didn't want to disturb him. She kissed his forehead, whispered, "I'll be right back," and quietly slipped out the front door. The parking lot outside the local grocery store was unusually crowded. Cassandra moved slowly, carefully navigating her way to the entrance. She smiled politely at passersby, but something in the air felt off. As she loaded 2 small bags into her trunk, she noticed a police cruiser idling nearby. The officers inside were watching her. She frowned. It wasn't unusual for people to look her way. Pregnancy tended to draw attention. But this was different. She shut the trunk, and that's when it began. The officer on the passenger side stepped out. His nameplate read a Brenner. "A mom," he called, approaching her. "I need to see some ID." Cassandra blinked. "Excuse me?" "You match the description of a suspect involved in a shoplifting incident." Cassandra chuckled nervously, placing a hand protectively over her swollen belly. "Shoplifting?" "I'm pregnant, sir. I just bought milk and prenatal vitamins." Another officer joined him, Officer Cruz, shorter, with a permanent scowl. She glanced at the receipt in Cassandra's hand and said, "We need to search your vehicle." "What?" "I didn't steal anything." The situation escalated in seconds. Brenner grabbed her arm. "Don't resist." "I'm not resisting," Cassandra yelled. "I'm pregnant. Get your hands off me." But they didn't stop. In a flash, Officer Cruz twisted her other arm behind her back, while Brenner shoved her face first onto the pavement. Her scream echoed across the lot. A crowd gathered. A few onlookers pulled out their phones, recording as the officers pressed Cassandra's face to the ground. Her belly pressed into the concrete, she cried out in agony. Please, I'm pregnant. You're hurting my baby." "Then stop resisting," Brenner barked. She wasn't resisting. Someone shouted from the crowd, "She's pregnant." "Get off her," yelled another. But the officers seemed immune to reason. They cuffed her as she cried and tossed her into the back seat of the cruiser. The cell phone videos captured every second. Back home, Darius Hayes stirred awake. Something didn't feel right. The house was too quiet. He glanced at the time, almost noon. Cassandra should have been back hours ago. He checked his phone. One missed call from an unknown number, then a text from a neighbor. "Something happened at the grocery store. You need to see this." Darius clicked the link. A shaky cell phone video loaded. He watched in silence as the footage played. His heart stopped. Cassandra, his pregnant wife, screaming, begging, being slammed to the ground. He didn't yell. He didn't throw his phone. He simply stood up, opened a drawer, and retrieved his wallet. In less than 3 minutes, Darius was in his Jeep, driving like a man on fire. At the Brooksville Police Department, Cassandra sat in a holding room, still cuffed, shaking. An MT was called, but she was denied access until charges were processed. A false ID, suspicious activity, resisting arrest, the clerk mumbled. Cassandra sobbed, "Call my husband, please." "Oh, and who is he?" Officer Brenner mocked. "Let me guess. A lawyer, a senator, or worse?" The crew smirked. "She probably thinks he's a superhero." The door flew open. Darius walked in, calm and cold. The clerk stood. "Sir, this area is restricted." "Not anymore," Darius said, flashing his military ID and badge. It wasn't just any ID. It was the kind that made generals stand up. "Get your chief, now." Chief Donnelly arrived within minutes, his face pale. "Captain Hayes," he stuttered. We weren't informed." "You assaulted my wife," Darius said quietly. "She's 8 months pregnant." "I assure you." He assure me nothing. "I've seen the footage. So has half the internet." Behind him, reporters were already gathering outside. "I want my wife released. I want EMT with her now. And I want both of those officers suspended pending investigation." Donnelly hesitated. "I'm not just a soldier," Darius said, leaning closer. "Lundarius Rand men trained to end wars before they start. I can make calls that make careers vanish. Do you understand?" The chief swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. The events that unfolded in the grocery store parking lot weren't just another case of mistaken identity. No, this became a spark that lit a fire far beyond the borders of Brooksville." By the next morning, the video of Cassandra being tackled to the ground had over 3 million views. The hashtags #JusticeForCassandra, #PregnantNoteAFelon, and #HandsOffBlackWomen were trending worldwide. News anchors, journalists, influencers, and civil rights attorneys began reposting the footage, dissecting every frame. Local media outlets initially downplayed the event, referring to it as a minor altercation. But the internet refused to let it slide. Twitter exploded with outrage. TikTok creators analyzed body cam angles. Instagram was flooded with petitions and screenshots of Cassandra's swollen belly pressed to the concrete, her hands twisted behind her. And Darius, he said nothing to the media. He stayed off social platforms. Cassandra was recovering at home, her wrists still bruised from the cuffs. A nurse came by daily to monitor her and the baby's condition. She tried to remain calm, but the trauma haunted her. Every siren outside, every police car passing the house made her flinch. But she wasn't alone. Darius made sure of that. He had quietly hired a team of lawyers from Washington, D.C., some of the most ferocious civil rights attorneys in the country. At the same time, he began reaching out to military contacts, government officials, and former colleagues in intelligence, and the pressure worked. 3 days after the incident, the Brooksville Police Department's website was hacked. A simple black screen replaced their homepage, with bold white letters flashing. "You are being watched." Later that night, someone leaked internal emails showing that Officer Brenner had 2 prior complaints of excessive force involving black citizens, both buried by internal affairs. Now it was too big to ignore. The city called for a press conference. The mayor, clearly uncomfortable, stood at the podium and stuttered through a vague apology, promising a thorough investigation, but the damage was done. Protesters had taken to the streets. Marches began forming across nearby towns, and when Cassandra was finally strong enough to sit upright without crying from the pain, she asked only one thing. "Do they even care that they almost killed my baby?" 1 week after the assault, Darius stepped into the public eye. He and Cassandra arrived at the courthouse under heavy media presence. Cameras flashed, microphones surrounded them. But Darius didn't blink. He stood tall, 6'3", built like a tank, wearing a tailored black suit and an American flag pin on his lapel. Flanked by his legal team and surrounded by community leaders, Darius took the podium as if it were a battlefield. "My name is Captain Darius Hayes," he began, his voice deep and calm. "I am a Delta Force commander. I've led missions in Syria, Iraq, and beyond. Beyond. I faced enemies foreign and domestic. But never did I think my greatest enemy would come from the streets of my own country, from the hands of those sworn to protect it. The crowd went silent. He paused, glancing at Cassandra, who stood beside him with quiet dignity, a visible bruise under her left eye. "This is my wife," he continued. "She's 8 months pregnant. She went to buy groceries. She was not armed. She was not aggressive. She was not even questioned. She was assaulted, humiliated, thrown to the ground while our unborn daughter struggled inside her." A single tear slipped down Cassandra's cheek. Darius looked directly into the cameras. "This is not just about race, it's about recklessness. It's about a culture that trains officers to fear instead of serve, to dominate instead of protect." He then turned his attention to the systemic issues. We cannot keep watching Black women brutalized while excuses pile up. We cannot allow body cam footage to vanish or reports to be rewritten to fit a narrative. People in the crowd began chanting, "Justice, justice, justice." Darius raised a hand. "I am calling for the following: immediate termination and prosecution of the officers involved, federal oversight into the Brooksville PD, mandatory de-escalation training, and civilian review boards with subpoena power." He wasn't done. And to those watching in uniform who think your badge gives you the right to brutalize innocent people, be warned. I will not stop. We will not stop. Because this isn't just about Cassandra. This is about every mother, every daughter, every human being who's been treated like they don't matter. The clip of that speech went viral, not just in America, globally. Celebrities reposted it. Political figures shared it. Civil rights organizations reached out to support the cause. A senator even quoted Darius's words on the Senate floor. The aftermath was seismic. Within 48 hours of the press conference, Brooksville PD was forced to release body cam footage, unedited this time. It confirmed what millions had already seen. Cassandra never resisted, never posed a threat. She pleaded for her life and her baby's life. Public outrage reached a boiling point. The officers, Brenner and Cruz, were immediately suspended without pay. Within a week, both were fired and charged with assault and endangering the welfare of a child. The district attorney, once reluctant, now stood before cameras, stating, "This office will pursue justice to the fullest extent." Meanwhile, protests continued, peacefully but powerfully. Brooksville's city council passed emergency reforms. Every officer would now be required to wear body cams, undergo implicit bias and de-escalation training, and face quarterly reviews by a civilian-led accountability board. Darius and Cassandra were invited to speak on national TV shows, university panels, and even in Washington, D.C., where they testified before the House Judiciary Committee on Policing Reform. But the most beautiful moment came 4 weeks later. Cassandra gave birth. A healthy baby girl, 7 pounds 12 ounces, with big brown eyes and her father's strong grip. They named her Justice Aaliyah Hayes. The name was chosen long before the attack, but now it meant something more. And in her nursery, framed above her crib, was a quote from her father's speech. "You don't have to wear a uniform to be strong. You don't need a title to be powerful. You just need to stand up when the world tries to push you down." 6 months had passed. The chill of winter crept into Brooksville, but inside the newly renovated Justice Center for Community Empowerment, warmth radiated, not just from the heaters or the sunlight pouring through the windows, but from the people filling the space. Darius and Cassandra stood side by side, Justice in her arms, now chubby and wide-eyed, wrapped in a soft pink blanket. They were no longer just victims of a system. They were the architects of something greater. The Justice Center wasn't just a building. It was a movement. It was a movement. Born from pain, it became a hub for training, education, and advocacy. Inside were rooms for legal workshops, therapy for victims of police violence, youth mentorship programs, and a media studio dedicated to documenting injustice, raw and unfiltered. People traveled from across the country to attend seminars and town halls led by Cassandra, who had become an unexpected but magnetic public speaker. She didn't use flashy words or polished slogans, just truth, delivered with a quiet fire that silenced rooms and stirred souls. "We didn't want to be an activist," she said once, holding back tears during a speech. "I wanted to be a mother, and I still am. But now I fight so no other mother has to go through what I did. No other child has to be born into a world where fear walks hand in hand with justice." He continued working behind the scenes. He had turned down offers to run for office, to become a military commentator on TV. His mission was bigger than politics or punditry. He trained police departments, taught conflict resolution courses to new recruits, and traveled the country speaking to veterans about using their leadership not just in combat, but in communities. Brooksville had changed too. Police accountability was no longer just a talking point. It was the law. The mayor had resigned. A new police chief, black, female, and fiercely committed to reform, was now leading with transparency and compassion. Officer Brenner and Cruz were found guilty.